Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I am joined by Laura Bradburn and Alan Morrison. We are looking at Ross County 0, Celtic 2, in what is always referred to as the Scottish League Cup by myself. I just don't go in for Skull Cup, Coca-Cola Cup, whatever sponsor cup.
Oh
It's
no,
the League Cup.
I did used to call it the Coca-Cola Cup. To be fair,
What age
yeah.
were you? Is
Oh,
it an
that
age
was
thing? Is
that
it an
was
age
when I
thing?
was a kid, though.
Yeah,
That
because I
was
used to
like,
call it the Skull Cup. That was before your time, Laura. Hagar the Horrible and all that. Anyway, let's talk about the game. We're 2-0 up. Before we do that, though, I've got to say that I did receive some very sad news about Jim Beattie, who was a player who came through the ranks at Celtic Park. He was part of that under-16 Scotland side who, managed by Craig Brown, got to the World Cup final in 1989 and were defeated by a 23-year-old Saudi Arabian side on penalties, I seem to understand. I remember being at the semi-final against Portugal, and Jim Beattie would have played in that game. The midfield in Portugal was led by some guy called Figo, but Celtic starlet Brian O'Neill still scored the winning goal that night. But unfortunately, Jim Beattie was battling MND, an illness we know only too well, and he lost that battle, unfortunately. So our thoughts and prayers are with Jim's friends and family this evening, and hopefully we can continue our fight against MND and the research to try and find a cure for that terrible disease. When we look at the game tonight, Laura, I'm going to start with yourself. First half opens up with us hitting the bar after 2 minutes, and then once again after 5 minutes, Welsh and Turnbull. And it looked at that point as though we were in for something of a rip-roaring performance by Celtic, and rip-roaring it certainly was. How impressed have you been?
yeah. The biggest compliment I can say is that despite all the changes in personnel, we seem to have picked up where we left off at the weekend, and I think I can't think of a player who I wouldn't give pass marks to in that first half. I think Giakoumakis has obviously shown he's very keen for a goal. Bernabe, I still don't know how you say it,
How do
has.
you pronounce Bernabeu, though? That's the
Well,
important one.
that's true. But
And how do you get a ticket for it?
that I don't know. He's shown a good bit of willingness to get forward and that kind of thing. A few loose touches here and there, but has done really well. But the biggest outstanding performance for me of the first half was Aaron Moy. I think for all we talk about the attacking way in which we've played, he was such an anchor for me in that midfield, and really, I hate to use the word destroyer because I don't think he is that, but he certainly was breaking up anything that Ross County had coming forward. He can put a foot on the ball and make a pass, and he just seems to be a very calming influence in the middle of the park.
Now, I don't know if it's because you mentioned Bernabeu, we moved on to Bernabeu, but I think the last player we signed from the Bernabeu was Tommy Gravison. And I don't know
Yes.
if it's just the lack of follicles or what, but he does remind me a wee bit, until he gets the ball, of course, of Tommy Gravison. Now, Alan, you and I were speaking before the game about his effectiveness, and obviously you were trying to put that into context, but he has had a very good first half. Again, playing in that number 6, allowing Callum McGregor to roam a wee bit more. Where do you prefer seeing McGregor? Moyes obviously allowing him a wee bit more freedom tonight.
Yeah, no, I think Moy's been impressive. It's the speed of his passing. If he can do it one touch, he does it one touch, and it's probably a little bit the camera angle at Dingwall. The pitch looks even more kind of compressed than what it probably is in real life. It's not actually that small, but it looks like there's not a room out there. But it looks like he's got all the time in the world to play the passes that he's trying to pass. So yeah, he's the way he's linked the play, absolutely fantastic. I think with McGregor, I'm probably happier seeing him in a deeper sort of 6 role, mainly because I don't like when he lines up to take a shot. 'Cause I don't think his technique is just rubbish. Basically, it's in my book. I just think he's very good. He's not a very good shooter, very good finisher. I know he scored tonight, but it took a bit of a deflection, etc. And again, nice quick thinking there from a corner. That variety that we've seen from corners is a huge feature of this season. But no, Moy's been keeping it ticking along, and if anything, he's even been moving it faster. I think Callum is more inclined to go forward. I think Moy still can can play the ball back and sideways a lot more, but he keeps it ticking over and he keeps possession. And I think in a tough away game in Europe, especially, I'm thinking, the two of them together as a double pivot, it's a system that Ange has used many times before. Could be something that we might see with possibly, or O'Reilly just a little bit further forward. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, definitely. Something that actually came up when Jared was on a couple of weeks ago as well. He was talking about that double pivot. I don't know if you were on the same show that day, but he was talking about the effectiveness of Ange using that system. Jock Sporran, good first half considering the number of changes. Yeah, you do often see, Laura, the changes, breaking up the fluidity and the groove of the side, but it doesn't look any different. And that's magnificent to know that Ange has got a system that is obviously going to flow throughout the first picks, the second 11, and hopefully, like we're talking about before the game, into the B team and the youth team. You need to have that system so that people can just step up when required, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest example of that, and it might be something that people scoff at when I say it, but there was a point where Welsh and Jens were passing the ball back and forward between each other towards the end of the first half, and Siegrist came out to provide them another option. And I thought that to me is as big an example of, Ange changing the entire philosophy of the way the whole squad thinks, not just that first 11. Because you're not telling me that Siegrist would have been coming out and doing that kind of thing playing for Dundee United. But having watched Joe Hart do it so much last season, you can see that it's something that Ange is definitely communicating to the players. And I'm sure you could find similar examples with the full-backs, the midfielders and the front three across the board. So like you say, it's about creating a style of play and a system and a philosophy that regardless of the personnel, the people that you bring in can do the same job as the person they're replacing and vice versa. And then all you need to worry about at that point is the quality of the players you've got in, which we're raising all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. You and Boy Martin, you're back. Tonight was all about winning the game, and we are looking very good at the moment. 100%. I do wonder at half-time if indeed Giakoumakis might have to come off. He seemed to take a bit of a heavy one, and he scores a goal tonight. He also was involved in moves where he's had 4 other chances. I actually wouldn't give him a hard time for that, though, because I think a couple of them came after that heavy challenge, which, it was just a coming together. But at half-time, I was having a look, just leading up to half-time, I was having a look at his record, Alan. I'm not as stato as yourself. I go by appearances and goals. That's about it when it comes to facts and figures. But that was his 20th goal for Celtic in 34 appearances. Kevin McCluskey informs me that it's his 19th start tonight. That is astonishing. And we know that these first, dozen goals or so were all one-touch finishes. Getting a bit greedy tonight with his 3 touches, but he's probably scored 20 goals with about 25 touches. It's an incredible record for someone who is classed as your second-choice striker.
It is, and his record. I mean, so what I would normally do, what you'd normally do from an analysis perspective, is look at it on a per 90-minute basis. So rather than look at the number of appearances, you'd add up the number of minutes, divide it by 90, and then you'd compare it. You'd divide the number of goals by that. So I mean, last season he was on 0.97, so virtually 1 goal for every 90 minutes of play. I mean, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic record. I mean, to put it into context, Kyogo was 0.83. And then the next highest was Maeda at 0.44. So, the two strikers are very similar, very high, rates in that regard. Giakoumakis is probably higher than Kyogo's and probably higher this season even, because he's pretty much there for that purpose. He's not required to complicate his game in any way. He's not required to perform the sort of role that we saw Edouard perform, where he would drop wide, he would link play, he would run different channels, he would swap with a winger, etc. Giakoumakis isn't being asked to do that, and nor should he, because he doesn't have the skill set to do it. So he's a smart recruit for the job that he's been asked to do, and that is to get into the box. And when you get him in the box, what you see is somebody who over 4 or 5 yards, his movement is superb. He's got just enough pace to get away from his defenders, and even when he doesn't, he's big enough and strong enough to get that little half yard that you need. And he also, the thing I really love about him is he doesn't care which part of his anatomy he gets on the ball. he just knows he's got confidence if he gets something on it, because he knows the ball's going to come at pace anyway. It's going to probably be a cross that comes in at some velocity, maybe even low. Doesn't matter whether it comes off your arse, not your elbow obviously, but whatever part of your body. He doesn't care. He just wants to find some way of bundling it into that, and I love that about him. So yeah, I think he's been a smart signing, a really smart signing, because if you look at his record, he's clearly played for teams that have not used him in the way that Ange is using him, the way that VVV used him as well. Because if you want him to be an all-round centre forward or even a number 9 target man, I suspect you're going to be sadly disappointed. But you use him in this way, and he's got some special skills.
Yeah, and thankfully, Laura reminded me there on the WhatsApp, which we're not allowed to mention, by the way, because it seems all a bit cliquey when we talk about the WhatsApp group, Laura, but isn't that how people communicate? Anyway, after the Alaba game, I think I described his performance as Cascarino-esque. Right, and you hold your hands up and say, but by the way, he was rotten that night, but he's obviously proved me wrong over the piece. But he is one of the players, Laura, who has had interest or supposed interest from elsewhere. There's a few we've heard of interest in Matt O'Reilly and Juranovic as well. If the clock chimes, I think it's at midnight tomorrow night, and that closes the transfer window, and Celtic have not lost that player, and we keep banging on about it on Acsom. What do you think the message is that is conveyed by the club, not just Ange, but by the club? For me, it's that we're doing something differently now, because in the last 5 seasons, as I've said before, we have always sold at least one asset, sometimes more. Last season, we sold Christie, Ayer and Edouard. So, I think it's a big statement if we get through this transfer window having not sold anyone. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting one, because although we made a lot of money selling Christie, Ayer and Edouard, I think perhaps a lot of people watching it and a lot of people in Acsom contributor group would say we weren't particularly disappointed to lose any of them. The difference with these players at the moment is I would be gutted to lose anybody from this squad, the way it currently stands. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but I think what is a slight advantage to us as well this season is the fact that the World Cup isn't until Christmas. I think if you're a player with your head screwed on, if you've had a good season at Celtic last season and you're getting a starting game this season, eyes are going to be on you in the Champions League. That's going to make it a lot more difficult for your international manager not to include you in a squad for the World Cup, and then, perform well in the Champions League and the World Cup, and the world's your oyster. But from a Celtic point of view, we just need to take advantage of anything we can to keep this squad together as long as we can, because I think we all know where it's headed, but as long as we have them scoring goals for Celtic, then that's all we can ask for, really.
I was really enthused with Ange's comments in relation to his own aspirations for Celtic in Europe. He's talking about making that mark, improving season on season, Alan. And we always talk about that, and it's not just fighting talk from Ange either. I mean, he obviously does have a strategy. He's got a vision. And a massive part of that must be, obviously, to keep the core together. But I do agree with what Laura says there in relation to the players last season. I wanted to keep Ayer. That was the one I wanted to keep of the 3. Then I saw Christie playing under Ange, and I thought, you know what, he could be quite handy under Ange Postecoglou. But what he's done is he's used those transfer fees, Alan, to build a team, to rebuild Celtic. And obviously the players he's brought in, often for a pittance, Joe Hart, Hatate, O'Reilly, not big transfer fees, even Juranovic, when you think about it, under £3 million. But I'm desperate for us to keep a hold of all of them. Maybe I'm being a bit greedy, maybe I'm being unrealistic. What's your take on it, Alan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the players that you mentioned, they would actually have all liked to have left the season before, but we all know that story. You don't have to rehearse it. It's a mixture of kind of COVID killing the transfer market and then Celtic making a strategic decision to hold on to people. But I think we're in a different place now. Like you see, we're in kind of building a squad. The exposure, if Celtic do well in the Champions League or put up a good performances, certainly in the Champions League, then obviously that's going to change the game. I think Laura makes excellent points about the positioning of the World Cup, and that changes the dynamics this year a little bit. So I completely agree with that. But there's one thing I'm enjoying is that there's no real pressure, as you say, to make a sale this year. We've generally either qualified for the Champions League or sold a big name. Generally it tends to be one or the other. So it looks like we're going to have a net outlay of around 16, 17 million in the transfer window this year. There doesn't appear to be any pressure, and I've not heard anything to say there's any pressure to make sales. It's probably more about managing the wage bill. There's the new financial sustainability rules now kick in, and that's all about wages and football costs to turnover. That's probably possibly more important. So I think we're probably in a reasonable position in that regard as well. So the thing that might change things a little bit is if we do well in Europe, and because we saw on the other side of the city, Bassi would never have gone for that money if it hadn't been for the European run, and a European run will draw attention to your players. That's no doubt about that. But the other thing I would add is that under Angie is what I'd call, what is referred to as a system manager. So it's more important that the players that come in are a fit for the way he wants to play. So it's not as simplistic as just saying, well, if I lose O'Reilly, I just get another clone and slot them in. But it's not like we're building the team around one player. Players can come in and do that role, and they'll be recruited to do that role. And I think that's the way it's going to be. And he'll send them on their way with good wishes. If they want to further their careers, no one's going to be happier than him to do that. And that's just the reality of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 2-0. We're up. It looks as though we're in the draw for the next round, but we will go back to the action in the second half. I'm going to thank every one of you for joining us on the comments section. We will bring up more of your comments at full time. And thank you once again to Laura and also to Alan for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.